Okay, welcome again, everyone. We are here to talk about climate and energy industry trends. My name is Eric Woodroof, and I'm just very excited to have you. We have people from all over the world attending this call, which is amazing for our people in the Middle East as well as China that are staying up so late to watch this. So I really appreciate that. What we're going to be doing is covering a lot of material, but we're going to be doing it in about 20 minutes. So we're going to be going very, very quickly and giving you some good information I think you'll be able to use. So the agenda for today is to do an update on energy and environmental trends. Those are the trends that affect really all markets. And that's part of the reason I think this is so important to get this information out. Not many people are aware of the information I'm about to present to you, so hopefully you can share that information and encourage more projects to get done, which is the whole motivation for my career as well as many of the people on this call. So we'll talk about energy and environmental trends, really the why we're having a energy industry and why we need to do more with it. The data comes from several sources: NASA, NOAA, The Economist, Wall Street Journal, etc. And then we will talk about market trends that are being impacted by this data and how things are shifting. So that's the plan. If you don't know who I am, my name is Eric Woodroof. I've been in the energy industry 20 plus years. I enjoy this very, very much. My company does energy audits and projects, and we've had ability to find good projects that have pretty good returns. And I want to highlight this thing about the 25% return on investments. Most of you can find projects that have 4-year paybacks or 25% returns. And that's something I think we need to sell a little stronger, because that's a very good project. I wish my 401k could get 25% every year and be able to guarantee it. So you all have that ability. We just need to get that information out there to get more of your projects done. So I've got some clients and I've written some books, etc. I work with the Association of Energy Engineers. I was the past president. That organization's in 90 countries, and we have 17,000 members, and that's a lot of fun to work with them. I also write for Buildings Magazine, and they are always putting out articles every month on energy, which is very interesting. And so that's probably enough about me. I have had the luxury of working with some interesting people through those experiences and through those associations. President Bill Clinton, or interviewing Condoleezza Rice about energy policy and maybe a little bit of football there. But I generally am working with engineers most of the time. One time I got to work with Schwarzenegger, and he is what I'd call a master salesman at getting energy and green to be somewhat attractive or sexy. And so we'll talk more about that. He was very, very fun as well. Now, back onto the agenda here, because we have a very limited time and a lot of stuff to cover. So we did a recording in 2013 that many of you attended, and this is going to be somewhat of an update. It won't have all those slides, but it'll have some updates on those slides, and that's what I'm going to dive into right now. Just to give you an update on where the Arctic ice is. In 2012, we hit a record low, which sounded a lot of alarm bells. And I've been tracking the data ever since then, and this is the polar ice coverage in millions of square kilometers, because the rest of the world operates on metric, if you hadn't noticed. But anyway, I've presented this data to even first graders, and they can see that when you go from 7.5 to 4.5, 5, it's not good. And in 2013, it went up a little bit, but as you can see in 2014 and 2015, the ice is, again, not very much at the top of the poles. And that is kind of important as a whole planetary climate regulation system. So that continues to change. But the data that's shocking to me is that between 2010 and 2013, the ice has been melting at twice as much or twice as fast, however you want to look at it, as during the previous 5-year study. So that is alarming, and I hope you can use that information to drive projects. We had this Paris climate thing, and that's great, and 100 and some odd countries signed up for that. That's fantastic, but we still have a lot of work to do, because our ice extent in 1981, the red ice is the oldest ice out there, and we want a lot of that red ice to be there. And if you look from 1981 to 2007, the red ice has largely disappeared. Most of the old ice is melted, and it's just a significant change. We're also seeing new problems, and this is from the last couple of years of literally exploding. It looks like a bomb, but it's methane that was trapped in the permafrost that has de-thawed and become explosive as methane hydrate. And this is happening. And the problem with methane is that it's 28 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than CO2. And so we're having this and other methane leaks, which is driving a lot of activity in the industry as well. Most of you are very familiar, and I had this in the previous webinar, and everyone's talked about this, how CO2 is correlated with temperature, and you can see the rise, pretty much since the Industrial Revolution. last couple hundred years that there's been a kind of a spike. But what I want to make the point is that there are other correlations to be aware of. And this is a longer term view of temperature versus CO2. Temperature is the white bar and CO2 is the blue. And I can show this to all kinds of people, young people, old people, and most people would say there is a correlation between temperature and CO2 over a very, very long time period. How do we get this data? This comes from stalactite data in caves as well as ice cores, which you're probably more familiar with. But regardless of your political opinion or bias or whatever, most people would say there is a correlation. Just for fun, to reach out to this group, go ahead and say yes or no if you see a correlation. I like to see some interaction with you. But the interesting thing is if you see the correlation, we say, yeah, the Earth is correlating, and there have been changes. And the temperature, just to give you a sense of scale of what some of these changes imply, that the temperature difference between this line here and this line down here is the difference between having a mile of ice over New York City. So the low points in temperature are ice ages, and the high points are what we would call normal. If you look at this area here, this is where all human recorded history exists in about a 5,000 year period right here. And this is a sweet spot for us where agriculture and everything blossoms. Now, the question is, if you agree there's a correlation and the Earth does naturally vary its CO2 concentration correlated with temperature, what do you think is going to happen when you consider that the 2013 CO2 concentration was 400 ppm, and it's been up and above that ever since then? How is that blue line going to affect the white line? And that's really the scary part, is are we going to drive ourselves off the sweet spot, which is another real call to action. So this keeps me awake at night, and I've got one more major piece to show you in a couple minutes that is shocking, and I think it'll really motivate you to do more projects. But again, March 2016, again, is the 373rd consecutive month we've got a global temperature above the average, and that's a problem. If you look at the last 15 years, 14 years of them were the hottest on record, and I think the hottest year was 2015. So we're continuing on our trend, even though we're making progress. Now, this is the piece I really want to get to, and there's some new information to this as opposed to 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, we presented this data, and this is kind of a statistical plot of temperatures that are normal would be white. I should say this is all normal, but white is moderate temperatures, red would be warmer than normal temperatures, blue would be slightly cooler than normal temperatures, and this is standard deviation. And this is a baseline of 30 years in 1980. And you can see it shifted quite dramatically after that period, where you've got almost a full standard deviation shift. And really what that impacts us is that the extreme weather events, which if you went back to the previous slide, you see very, very few number of very, very warm days. Well, now you have this difference of, instead of being covering 0.1% of the Earth, they now cover 10. And that's a big change. But what is shocking, and the new data that I've just been recently made available, is that in the last 10 years, or taking the shift more current data, it's gone from 10% to 14.5%, just literally in a 5-year difference in measurement. And so that is kind of shocking. If you really want to dig into that there's all the data is down here and updated in 2016. This is a big problem. This is causing a lot of storms and a lot of other things that are going on with our planet. And these things help and influence our food supply, water, global health, and infrastructure. If just to start off with the water thing, look at the ocean. Most of the CO2 that goes in the atmosphere goes into the ocean. 30% of it does anyway, and it is absorbed by the ocean, which is making the ocean more acidic, and some of these smaller organisms are having a difficult time making their shells, and that affects food population of small fish, which affects the fisheries of larger fish, and that affects us. If you look at populations of marine animals, the decline of 49% is significant since 1970. And if you look on land, we've got 4% more humidity in our atmosphere just globally, and that affects more storms on land as well as at sea, but these are more catastrophic flooding events. And if this was a full keynote speech, I would give you video and things like that, like I did last week, but we don't have time, and video doesn't do well on webinars. So just know there's a lot more things going on. And this is a really shocking fact that half the animals are gone in the last 40 years. Just fascinating stuff. Including some impact on humans. And this is in China, in Beijing. About 1/14 of the planet lives in northern China, 500 million people, and their average expected lifespan of northern China declined by about 5 years, and this was published in July 2013. Now, this had a very big impact as far as a reactionary impact in the Chinese government and what they've done. And I will talk about that in a few minutes on the positive side of this presentation. If you haven't noticed, this first half of the presentation is kind of depressing. And then we're going to move into some good news, and that hopefully will bring you out of the doldrums of this depression. Just kind of finishing out the depression piece, if you look at sea level rise risk of cities, most of the cities are in Asia here as far as population goes. And as far as assets go, a lot of the assets here in Miami and New York are in the top three. But let's just consider that if you think about population, if sea level rises just 10 feet or something, you're talking about hundreds of millions of people having to move. And we're having a problem globally with just 4 million Syrians and people in the Middle Eastern region in that area trying to move. Just imagine what a couple 100 million people would look like as far as a global disruption. And that would affect our economy. So these are things to be depressed about as well. So now let's shift in. We're 14 minutes into this, and I want to shift into some market trends and some good news that'll hopefully inspire you to do more projects. First of all, China, as a result of the data that I shared with you a few minutes ago, they did implement a cap and trade system in 5 cities and 2 provinces. These are major industrial regions. If you've ever been to China, this is where most manufacturing factories are, in the Pearl River Delta, and they're investing about twice their military budget to clean up the air around Beijing particularly. But also, they have put an 8 times tax on coal in 2015. They just released their 13th fifth-year plan. The plan calls for $40 a barrel floor price on carbon. They're phasing out 500 million tons of coal from existing mining operations. I mean, they're doing all kinds of stuff in China. And I'll talk about them with respect to their solar impact in a few minutes, but well, I might as well do it now. They basically just surpassed Germany as far as installations go of solar. So tremendous change going on there, just in a few years. So that's a major thing that's going on. You can see in the U.S., and I've got to update this. This gets updated all the time, but basically, most of the states have done renewable portfolio standards, kind of demanding that utilities get their energy from renewable sources. So we have that kind of trend going on. In the marketplace, as far as private companies, you see major companies participating in these competitions, and there's a lot of kudos that go to people who make it on this list, and especially in the carbon disclosure project. This is a project that's about Wall Street and disclosure, and most of the major companies are disclosing their carbon footprints and sustainability plans. And you can notice the companies here, just ones you might recognize in healthcare or even industrials, they don't get 99 and 100 point scores by ignoring this. They're spending a lot of time focused on making their sustainability report very strong. And I'll just say this, that all energy efficiency projects and energy management projects directly impact sustainability reports. They are definitely a feather in their cap in that function. So your projects definitely impact these people, and they're definitely paying money to get this stuff, to get their sustainability message shared and documented. On the generation side, since 2010, there's been more investment in renewable generation of electricity than there was in fossil fuels, and that trend has increased. You can see 2009, 2010, they beat it, and 2013, 14, much more investment in renewables. And this is one main point I want to make in this presentation, is that these are renewable generating technologies like solar and wind, which have a raw payback without financing of, say, 10 years plus. And I'm challenging everyone who's listening to this to really think about that the 10-year payback projects are getting funded left and right. But you may have projects that have a 5-year payback, basically twice the return, that are having difficulty getting funded. And we just have to do a better job of presenting our energy efficiency and energy management projects because we have a better raw return. These guys have financing set up, and we just need to work on those kinds of problems, removing those barriers, because the path has been laid in the generating capacity, as you can see from these graphs. And just if you're curious where that money is coming from, most of it is private money. It is not mandated by government or whatnot. This is voluntary private money where the money comes from. Let's just talk about wind energy projects. In the year 2000, there was an estimation made that we would reach 30 gigawatts by 2010. And 3 years ago, we were happy to report that goal was exceeded by 17 times or 14 times. And basically I think I might have screwed that up, but we've beat that goal by 14.5 times. The solar one is even more impressive. When you look at the projection for solar at 2010, they were thinking that it was going to be, some 1 gigawatt, and we beat that by 17 times. Okay, that's the number I'm remembering in my head. And so if you look at solar, we beat it by 17 times, and that was in 2010. Since that time, in 2015, we've exceeded it by 58 times, and this year, global solar energy progress will be beat by that estimate by 68 times. That is substantial improvements in the solar progress, and there are more solar jobs now than there are in coal. And you'll find solar everywhere. I mean, solar is in places aesthetically that would be maybe not permitted by my house rules anyway, or my wife's house rules. I don't know if you have to live by those rules, but places that have very high aesthetic requirements are even doing solar. So I'm going to get to some more solar stuff in a minute, but even if you ignore all the climate change stuff and societal data, even first graders understand this concept that solar is expanding just basically due to economics, and it's following the same kind of progression that the cell phone industry had on the telecommunications market. If you look at which, our existing system, our existing electrical system, where you have a power generation station, a bunch of stuff, transformers, $8 million substations, all this infrastructure, poles and wires that takes a lot to maintain, and you look at all the costs to do that, and the efficiency of the generation station is only 30%, and then you have losses. Just to get an electron down here, if you look at that compared to solar, it's a no-brainer that solar is going to be more cost-effective in rural areas, and that tipping point of grid parity has been passed in some places of this country. All you need now is a battery, and then you're setting up people in rural areas to basically defect or disconnect from the grid, and that causes a problem for the utility because now all the revenue that was coming from this guy is now going to be is gone, and all the cost of maintaining the infrastructure is still there. All that cost is going to get shifted to the remaining customers. Now, it doesn't even have to be a full defection. Right now, a significant percent of energy is coming from solar, and that is causing the utilities to have to deal with this. This is a utility problem. It can be solved maybe with community solar and utilities just choosing different fuel sources, such as choosing solar and industrial grade economies of scale batteries, which are being developed. And that's something I wanted to talk about here. The large lithium ion battery cost trend has dropped 70 or 80% in a 10-year period, and the trend that that's on is very positive. That's another key market trend that is affecting energy projects. If you look at other places in the world that have just decided to forget the whole grid thing, or in expanding areas, they're doing this kind of pay-as-you-go solar thing where people are doing microfinancing, and this is actually happening in some places where the rate of installation is 2 per minute, 24 hours a day. It's amazing. And as I mentioned before, 2015, China passed Germany as the world's largest market. They installed 15 gigawatts of new solar capacity, and they are planning to triple that solar capacity by 2020. So just tremendous amount of work going on here in the solar industry. And if you were watching the news last week, May 3rd, there was an announcement in Bloomberg as well as Wall Street Journal that solar projects in Dubai was bid, et cetera, and that basically the cost of this is going to be about 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Now that's that's pretty low kilowatt hour generation. Now that's in Dubai, that's a very sunny place. But if you look at the projects that are going on right now, it's very much feasible today to get projects that are in the 4-cent range in a lot of places. And so just see where that trend is going. This really makes it difficult, challenging for the fossil fuel industry to compete based on economics, unsubsidized, just simple math. So you have a lot of opportunity here changing the market. Now, I want to leave you with a few things. Hopefully these trends, the depression and also the progress trends, have helped some people here, but I want to leave you with some solutions that I think are very, very important. One is that this year there are some special tax deductions in the United States. And I talked about this in Buildings Magazine, January edition of the Energy Manager newsletter. And let me just go through the basics of this. The tax deductions are just for this year. So if you do, they're actually for 2015 and 2016, but they expire at the end of this year. So if you were to look at a typical project many of you could do, and we wrote about this case study in the magazine, or you can watch webinars, which I'll show you at the end of this as well. If you look at a typical project, you might have a project that's got about a, 5-year payback or 22% return. Over 10 years, you'd save $2 for every one if you ran the math and were real conservative. But this would be pretty typical. You guys could find projects like this with the tax deductions, not even claiming all of the possible tax deductions, but just getting some of the tax benefits that are available right now. Your project can look like a 69% return. And in some cases, it could be even over 100%. because the tax deductions are so strong if you're able to qualify for all of them. But if you just qualify for some of them, you're going to be much better off, and you're talking about saving $7 for every $1. You can present this a lot of different ways. You can say it's a 70% return, or about a year and a half, less than a year, less than I got to think about that. Just invert that and you get your simple payback, very, very short simple payback. Or you could say over 10 years, save 7 for every 1. Presented a variety of different ways to accomplish your goal there of getting someone to understand this. Another presenting option is a lot of you, and I'm just curious if we can do a poll, how many of you present on the idea of simple payback? You may present projects that way, and that's somewhat normal. Thank you for many of you participating. I appreciate that, Craig Honori and others. But another way to present it is return on investment, and you might present both, because a 4-year payback is roughly 25% return. Most people, we did some interviews with customers, when you say payback, they think I have to wait 4 years, and they get this false idea in their head. When you think about return on investment, people actually think this. They say, wow, that's more than my 401k, or they can relate this. Plus, you're getting 25% per year, and you might want to make sure that you state that that's 25% year for every year of your project. And there are not many investments that offer that kind of a return. So I would challenge that we have in energy efficiency much better investments than many other options available on Wall Street, and with far less risk. I know I looked at my 401k yesterday, and it's flat from last year to this year. I'm going, why am I paying you people money? I could be investing in this and getting 25%. So I just keep that comment and that thought in mind. Just quickly to review, we've talked about some market trends, and the action that I'm asking you to do here is to share this information, get it out there. Some of that statistics is pretty important, and present your projects as high return investment projects. You've got great projects. We really need this to turn this climate and energy problem around, and I'd like to see more energy efficiency, energy management projects get approved, because they're great investments. If you need help, you have lots of free information out there. Even on our website, there's plenty of free stuff. You can click on resources and webinars, and plenty of free articles. All my stuff is there. And I will even show you, I'm going to just go offline here because this is easier to show you this. If I go into any standard Google or web browser, and you go to Profitable Green Solutions, you can click on resources or click on shop, but somehow find a way to get to free sample videos. And if you click on that, you'll find a full-on explanation of the special tax benefits and walking you through the math and all that stuff. If you want to hear my insights of my interviews with Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's available as well as other webinars that are totally free that you can use to help you sell projects and get more things done. Non-utility benefits from energy conservation is a fantastic one to watch as well. And so I really hope you will take advantage of that and get more projects done. And with that, I want to say thanks to everyone who came, and want to just review the main things of this were to show you some climate data, to show you some updates on some shocking stuff, maybe depress you, but also motivate you and show you the trends that are happening that are really encouraging in our industry. There's a lot of great things going on in solar, but again, in energy efficiency, we have such a much greater returns in energy efficiency. We should be doing even better than the solar people. So I want to just encourage everyone out there to go keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you being here and hearing me out on this, and I hope you have a great day.